Well, there we go. We're joined now by former advisor to Presidents Clinton and Bush, Steve Gill, who joins us with his thoughts. Oh, Steve, we have a tradition in the United Kingdom called pantomime, and there's always a villain in pantomime, and these play out at Christmas time and whatever, and people go and see this. This is a pantomime beyond belief, and Donald Trump is the villain at the centre of it. And people quite like the villain, don't they? They boo and they hiss, but they really secretly applaud the villain. How's he doing with all of this?
First, I think I've come to the conclusion that both he and Boris Johnson are under attack because of hairstyle. Both of them have similar hairstyles. So maybe that's what's attracting the attacks. Yeah, he's doing good in terms of the political polls. It's interesting that the more he gets hit, the better he does, not only in the Republican primary, as I think people there clearly see that this is a persecution, not a prosecution. And I think the injustice that we've seen from the Department of Justice, the FBI, these agencies have been weaponized by the Biden administration. And you see a different set of standards in terms of how President Trump is being treated with respect to documents than you saw Hillary Clinton, who destroyed thousands of documents that were in her possession, actually took hammers to cell phones to destroy documents and technology that was under subpoena. You have Joe Biden, who was keeping classified documents as a vice president and as a U.S. senator, not protected by the Presidential Records Act, which President Trump and his documents are protected by. This is persecution, and I think that at the end of the day, the Presidential Records Act is going to take precedence over this Espionage Act that they're trying to shoehorn into prosecution of President Trump.
Well, look, our viewers will decide whether or not they accept that the system is corrupt. I suppose the question is he going to go to jail?
I don't think so. I think there are plenty of legal defenses that President Trump has. And keep in mind that in the U.S. system of justice, you are innocent until proven guilty. I was on a panel with some Democrats yesterday, and they were talking about the fact that President Trump and the Republicans need to stop pointing the finger at what did Biden do, what did Clinton do, and focus on proving his innocence. And I pointed out that's the problem. The Democrats think Donald Trump has to prove his innocence. The reality is they have to prove his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And the facts of the case, the law in this case, doesn't necessarily mean that he will be convicted, much less ever go to jail.
But he will be deflected, Steve. That is, I mean, if he runs for the presidency, he'll have a lot on his plate, will he not, as well as trying to campaign?
Yeah, and the timing of this is going to be interesting. I don't think that this will get to trial before the next presidential election. We're looking at a little bit over a year or so until we get into the November elections. He may very likely get through the primary process, get through the elective process. And as Eamon points out, he could pardon himself. Some of the other Republican candidates, DeSantis and others, have said that they see the injustice of what's going on, and they're vowing to pardon him if he is in fact convicted. So we're a long way from him having to pardon himself, but that is certainly a possibility.
Eamon was describing the pantomime of it all. There were lots of posts about the prosecutor who has gone, above and beyond really to try and put this case together, a guy called Jack Smith, and they were face to face for the first time in that Miami courtroom yesterday. What was that moment like? And, what did Trump make of it all?
Well, we certainly see in his speech last night back in Bedminster that he is not backing down. He was calling this guy deranged and everything else he could come up in the book with. The thing about this prosecutor is that he is under the direction of the Biden Attorney General acting at his behest. So this is the Biden administration going after their primary opponent, a guy who is leading dramatically in the Republican primary and beating Joe Biden head to head in most primaries. And I don't think it's a coincidence that this is all taking place at the same exact time as we have documented evidence from a credible FBI informant who's been paid hundreds of thousands of dollars in the past, that Joe Biden himself took a $5 million bribe from one of the executives at Burisma in Ukraine, and that there are 17 audio tapes, about 15 that bear the voice of Hunter Biden and 2 that bear the voice of Joe Biden. There is no investigation by this FBI, by this Department of Justice, by this administration into Joe Biden, the big guy, and the Biden crime syndicate. And I think that there is no coincidence that this is actually a distraction from that rather than trying to actually prosecute Donald Trump.
But Steve, what I want to know, and as the trial progresses, I'm sure we'll find out, what is in the boxes? I mean, if we can then come away and say, oh, we shouldn't have been in possession of that, these deadly secrets or this chemical formula or whatever, yes. But if it is like a souvenir of his agenda visiting the UK and going to visit the Queen and whatever it is, and those would be classified documents because his itinerary would not want to be, they wouldn't want that released. And you sort of think, well, they're like souvenirs. I mean, what on earth do you think is in the boxes that would provide any value to President Trump?
Well, that's a lot of what he talked about last night, that of the dozens and dozens of boxes that were retained after he left the White House, which is his prerogative under the Presidential Records Act. Some of them were newspaper clippings and some of them were clothing. Of the 15 boxes that were remaining under lock and key at the behest of the FBI after they had come in and surveyed what he had, out of the 15 boxes that they took, only about 150 documents in all of those boxes are actually at the dispute. And some of those are disputed as whether or not they had been declassified by the president as president and that he had authority to retain them under any circumstances. So a lot of these were just memorabilia.
If Trump does get re-elected, surely the first thing he has to do then is have a system like we have in the UK and separate the judiciary from the legislature so that it is completely independent, and you don't have this undermining of the judiciary when every time somebody who has a different political position from the person who's been appointed can defy the law, essentially.
Well, and that's why you usually will have the appointment of a special prosecutor who is independent. And yet again, in the case of Joe Biden and the documents that he was keeping, again, keep in mind, the documents that Joe Biden kept were being stored in his garage, less security than being stored in a locked bathroom at Mar-a-Lago. And these were retained as a U.S. senator and as a vice president. He had no authority to retain these documents under the Presidential Records Act, and yet no independent prosecutor has been appointed by his attorney general. No independent prosecutor has been appointed to investigate the $5 million bribe that he is alleged to have taken from the Burisma executive. So there should be an independent prosecutor to move it out of politics. The fact they haven't done that, I think, underlines that this is political.
Well, I think his main worry, the main threat against him is Melania. Because Melania must say, here's me, I'm going into the bathroom this morning, I've nowhere to put my makeup, I've nowhere to put my brushes and everything that I've got to do.
She doesn't need much.
But she's going to say, there's no space, she's going to say, Donald? Or what would her accent be? Donald, you'll get this rubbish out of here right now.
How big the mansion is, there's never enough bathroom space. And the fact that he had to occupy one with all these boxes, you're
devastating.
Right. That puts any guy in trouble in any country in the world.
Quite right. And with those wise words, Steve, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Presidential Advisor Steve Gill there. Thank you.